Welcome into the Harvest Friends. I am Abigail and I am here with Andrew and Lakeith. Hey guys, we've got a really awesome show for you today. But first, if you are new to this station, just know that we are here to bring you the tools and tricks that you need to be a disciple in the modern day. So we hope that you will click on the subscribe button. There's a little bell on YouTube. All those things so that you don't miss anything. Today's show is going to be awesome. We're talking about, ironically, the digital age and how maybe not to get taken away by all the trappings of said digital age. Mostly our phones, right? That's what we're thinking.
It's a big one.
That's really what we're talking about. So we're going to get into that today, things that have helped us, that have maybe convicted us, and we're going to get into all those goods. I may have had to say some prayers this morning because I felt like if there was ever going to be an episode where I was in danger of being hypocritical, this was the one. So I just want to up front tell everyone this is probably my biggest struggle is digital stuff. I'm just the time aspect of it, I think, right? Yeah. Like that's really what we're getting into.
Yeah, that's
is the time issue.
That's going to be a part of it. That's, in fact, we're going to talk about 3 dangers of the digital age, and one of them for sure is the time suck that the digital age has kind of put on us as modern day people. And so, yeah, that's absolutely true. And I'll just also just say, we talked about last week, I think it was last week's show where we talked about that these, we aren't experts in the sense that we're doing it all perfectly. We want to do shows where we talk about real issues that we ourselves are facing as we try to be disciples and make disciples in the 21st century. And, these dangers with the digital age are things that we see and struggle with in our own life, that we see in those that we're discipling. So, yeah, we'll be preaching to the choir today.
Yeah, it doesn't help, Abby, like you said, that my phone alerted me this past week about my screen time and gave me some hard numbers that I won't disclose on air. But man, I'm like, come on, I was already getting convicted, but now you want to show me how long I've been on my phone daily.
Yeah,
come on.
So maybe this is just mainly for the 3 of us, guys. Anyone listening, whatever you get is just going to be a bonus.
Confessional episode for us, for sure. But I do want to kind of talk about, before we really get into the nitty gritty, I know that a lot of people talk about, being addicted to our phones. And this is just a general all human beings, but we as believers, this is something that is important to us as disciples of Jesus. So let's just get into maybe why that is. Why is this something that we as Christians should be extra concerned about? So let's maybe talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, one way to think about worship and devotion is what we give our affections and our attention to. It's one way to understand what it means to worship something, or in the most practical sense. It's something that you are dedicating time and you're dedicating affection towards, whether that's an actual emotion. And really, the digital age is calling for us to do both of those, to spend a lot of time. I've got a book recommendation that I'll share later, but it talks about how these modern day tech companies, they are not accidental in the way they go about trying to pull your attention and to keep it. And so, just as the Lord wants us to make a conscious choice to pay attention to Him and to reserve our top devotion to Him, companies like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and that's what they want. They want you to give your full attention. If you'll give as much as you'll give, that's what they want. And so I do think you mentioned the word addiction, and that's a real issue. That's not hyperbole. That's something that all of us can struggle with in the modern age. And Keith and I were talking just before we started recording, and there's a passage at the end of Luke 12 where Jesus is talking about the weather, but really he's talking about the expectation that we as people should be able to analyze the present time. That's what that's the way he said it at the end is, why is it that you don't know how to analyze the present time? And so the present time for us in 2020 is that we now live in a digital age, and it's a real challenge for us in terms of our personal life of devotion. It's also a big challenge when it comes to making disciples. The people that we're trying to reach, these are real issues that they're grappling with. And there's opportunities in there too. So we're getting to do this podcast in San Antonio and San Diego, but there are challenges that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Andrew. I think it's almost becoming all things to all people. Like, we're going to use social media. We're going to use technology to interact with folks around us and around the world. So I think discerning how to use that and when to use it and how intentional we should be with that is going to be a challenge. So I think that makes it important for believers to talk about, because we have to exist in this world where this is, probably the biggest challenge for all people. It's the one thing we have in common is the use of our devices or platforms that we like to use to occupy our time, and it's competing for our attention. So we have to be really tactical in using it, but we don't want to sound like we're taking our hammer and we're destroying all digital. Like, let's go back to the Stone Age and like not use our phones, get a flip phone, like destroy our social media. It's more so like, how can we be wise about the current times, and how do we maneuver strategically to keep God first while being present on these various platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what you're both saying. And maybe just to do a little spin on the whole idea of an idol, just this year during 2020 and all the fiasco that has brought our lives, I was really convicted about the aspect of idol worship. I think I've always seen it kind of what you said, Andrew, where it's something that, you love and you kind of delight in. But I was really convicted by the worship aspect of idols, of it taking the place of comfort. So the things that comfort me when I'm in great need, or I'm really stressed or anxious, or, we don't know what we're supposed to do about such and such. And so I started to see a real problem in my own life of when I was feeling that anxiousness and all the things that 2020 was bringing on in my personal life, where that was when I was picking up my phone. And it was a huge conviction, as far as I had not thought of idol worship in that way. It is something that's replacing God in our lives. And I did not think that my phone was replacing God. But when I saw that instead of spending my time praying and really seeking the Lord, and was instead kind of finding an escapism,
right.
Ooh, that was a problem. So I think this is why this is important. So we want to get into it today. We're going to probably cover very obvious reasons why we should not be sucked into this digital age, but we hope that we can give you maybe some good solutions. That's our hope. That's the aim. So I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. I'm really excited to learn from you guys. Let's get into the biggest one, which Keith, you just mentioned, and that's the time waster. And usually that's our phones. So let's get into what an issue this is. I also get the alerts, Keith. I think it's an iPhone thing. I don't know if Androids do that.
Oh, man.
Does your phone do that, Andrew? Does it tell you what's up about your week?
There's probably a way that you can set it, but it isn't there by default.
iPhones, they default it to you, and I think it's on Sunday afternoons or something. I just get this little notification, and it's like, congratulations, you went down 10%, and I'm like, woo woo, and then I see actually how much that is, and I'm like,
yeah, it's been one of the worst things about the switch from Android to Apple, because it's like, hey, we want you to be addicted, but at the same time, we're going to rub it in a little bit. So here's your numbers. You spent 6 hours a day on your phone last week. It's like, oh my goodness. So I just said I wasn't going to disclose the numbers, but there they are, guys. There they are. There they are. But yeah, the time waster, I thought for a long time that it was something that the younger generation struggled with, as far as YouTube and games and stuff like that. And but I noticed that it was also the adults, there is a lot of adult YouTubers and adult people who are just as consumed as everybody else. So I don't think it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it's this younger generation. They're really always, it's all of us, like all of us are infected. So yeah, we do have to, lean on God to get convicted about how this works. So I think probably the number one thing that I get rebuked about in my marriage is phones, like when to use it and when not to use it and how much I'm using it. So, but I think that's a good thing. You need people to hold you accountable. And so it's helpful to have my wife, and have our little rules set up to where, all right, the phone is gone. So, yeah, I think you almost have to lean on God to draw convictions about, not having these idols win out in our lives. Like Abby was saying, like one of the simple things I do, I'm not on Andrew's level yet with my phone, but before I wake up and touch my phone or go near it, I make sure I spend some time praying to God just to acknowledge him first before I see anything else and to connect with him first. But yeah, when it comes to wasting time, yeah, you almost have to really evaluate yourself and decide, like, man, like, am I going to give more of my devotion towards, devices and technology, or am I going to balance that out with my time with God? Because right now in my life, it's not equal right now. Like I'm definitely doing more screen time per se than I am time in the Word, studying, praying, reaching out to folks. So like you guys said, I'm still learning in this area.
Yeah, the one of the things that I do is I turn the notifications off, actually. So like my phone, there's no flashing light. If something comes through, it doesn't flash, and it also doesn't make a noise. My phone is almost always on silent, and not even like the vibrate mode, because then it's the same effect on you. Is that as soon as you know that something has come through, like you just want to know what is it, and is it important? Is it something that needs attention right away? And so even if you try to ignore it, like once you know it's there, it's really hard to mentally focus on whatever else it is that you were concentrating on at the time. So yeah, I think this is a big one, the idea of time wasting, and one of the biggest dangers, I think, is just the notifications, the way phones are designed to interrupt. They're actually designed to interrupt your life. And that can be a good thing. If you're expecting an important phone call, then I'll turn my ringer on. But most of the time, the things that are being interrupted, I would say, 9 times out of 10, the interruption is not critical. It's not time sensitive. But once you look at it, then you go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Before you know it, way more time has passed than you expect. It's the same thing for apps like YouTube, which is probably one of my biggest struggles is YouTube, because you'll watch a video and then there's like a recommended video and you're like, oh yeah, that looks really interesting too. So you can really go down this rabbit hole. Streaming services, same thing. Netflix, these companies they're doing what they do, which is trying to keep your attention on them. And so if you don't realize that, then you've pretty much already lost the battle. And that's I guess one thing I would say about time wasting is just realize that this isn't a neutral issue. Technology is wanting you to spend more and more time, wasting your time by spending it on their platforms. And so you have to be aware of that and purposeful about deciding, like, how much time do I want to spend on social media? How much time do I want to spend using streaming services like Netflix or Amazon Prime? Are there certain times when I'm working that I don't want to be interrupted? So I think that's just being alert and being alert is a key for time wasting.
And just intentional, right? I think we're saying we know that there's an active force that is going at us. These services they have people working for them who is their job to know how to keep people engaged. And so if we know that, we know there's an active force working to get us to do one thing, then we have to be active about it in response. Otherwise, we're just a passive member of this digital age, and it will be rough. So I think just having this active, I will be in control of my life on these devices and on these services. For me, it's probably Instagram, because it's just the scroll, man. It is, you can just scroll and then you look up and you're like, what happened? So I really have to be very intentional about when I get on Instagram, like certain times of the day, or like my check-in to like see what, responses I've gotten, or, usually it's conversations with friends and DMs and stuff. I'm not really like a just browsing person, but I am a very social person. So I have to then say, okay, this is the amount of time I'm going to go in and check all my messages. And then I set timers, like legit timers on my phone. For all of you listening, just know that I tried once to do, there are apps that you can download that will then monitor your amount of time on different services. But I'm kind of a rebel and I just hated those apps having control. And so I would constantly turn them off. So it didn't work, but timers works for me. So do whatever works for you to help you be in control, and not just say to yourself, I'm going to only give such and such amount of time to this, but actually then find some way to keep that. Because I think very easily we can get sucked into kind of going back on our word on that. And then, Keith, you said a really great thing about your wife, and that is accountability. Like, this is an issue where we probably all need some accountability in our life. So we've talked about accountability a lot on this show. This is one of the things that probably needs to be added to basically all of our accountability question lists. And I don't think we have it on ours, but I think I'm going to add it, because I don't think people directly are asking me, like, Abigail, how's your phone usage? And that would probably be really helpful. So.
Hey friends, thanks for watching the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to say, if you're someone who's looking for insights, ideas, and inspiration that will fuel your faith for the 21st century, then make sure you sign up for our weekly newsletter, Harvest Highlights. It's free and it's loaded with resources that will help you be a disciple and make disciples in the everyday places. So make sure you check it out. There's a link in the description of this video. Back to the show.
Yeah. Okay. So we're kind of, we go a long time on each one. So let's go on. Good stuff though. Let's get into perspective. So for sure, this is probably more a social media problem on our digital devices, but there can be a real shift in how we even see the world when we spend a lot of time on our digital devices. So how can we combat that? How should we view this? What shall we do? Other than just like ban everything.
Yeah, this is another one where you just have to realize that everything that's coming at you, for instance, on social media, but also through traditional media, it's not neutral. In fact, it's by design, you're being exposed to content that's designed to agitate you, because if you agitate, you stay on the platform, or you engage, you go into the comment section. So by design, what's being sent your way, whether it's on Facebook or whether it's on the cable news channel, it's designed to give you an out of balance perspective. And the way I think of it is this, if you only and constantly ate junk food, then you would have a negative physical consequence to that. Like, you would not be healthy physically. Well, it's the same thing. Like if you only consume junk media, or you consume too much junk media, it's actually bad for your mental, spiritual, and emotional health. Like, you can't do it. You can't consume that and not have it influence your perspective and how you view life. My wife and I were talking about this recently, and we thought, if our lives right now had the same media world that existed 30 years ago, so you didn't have any internet, social media, and you had, Dan Rather and Tom Brokaw on the nightly news, and you were just experiencing life. Like, life is really good. It's, we're healthy. We have family and friends that love us. We live in a beautiful part of the world. God is good. And it would just be a totally different perspective. But because we live in a time where we're just receiving all of this, like the worst news that's happening anywhere in the world is coming at you nonstop every day, it does. It affects the way you view life and your sense of danger, that the world that the sky is falling. And I read this quote by a guy named Naval Ravikant, and he said the human brain isn't designed to process all of the world's emergencies in real time. And that's kind of what social media is demanding of us, that we process all the world's emergencies every day, all the time. You can't do it. And so part of managing our digital age is you don't want to be the ostrich with its head in the sand, but you need to regulate what you expose yourself to. And you need to be able to say, like, does this really affect me and what's going on in my life right now? And again, 9 times out of 10, the answer is going to be no. This does not affect you personally.
Yeah, Andrew, that's really good. I don't know who those nightly news guys are, but I think everything else was really good. I don't know, Abby. I never.
30 years ago, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, about that. But I'm at that cutoff where I don't know who those guys are. But I think perspective is huge. I think sometimes, it's one of the biggest things for me when I'm feeling down on myself, or I'm kind of in the woe is me mood, and God will remind me of somebody else or something else that's going on. And it makes me realize how much I have to be thankful for, and just knowing the fact that I know God and know that he's in control. Because one of the things that happened early on in the Bible was that the enemy had called into question God, and did God really say, So I think that question looks different for us today, but like, is God really in control? Is God really good? Like, how can these things be going on and be so severe and you still think that God is in control? So I think perspective will help a lot. Like you said, Andrew, if you get sucked into it and you go in, like, how deep does this rabbit hole go? And you find out, like, man, it goes really deep. Like, and I'm not even there yet. It goes deeper, And I'm going deeper, and it's getting darker and darker and darker. So you have to keep perspective on God. And I think that's an awesome time to cling to some of his promises that God has for us. And God is with us through these things. We don't have to conjure it up on our own and try to figure out, like, man, like, all right, how can I, tackle this situation or be present? And I'm not saying sit back and do nothing, but at the same time, it's okay to be still and trust God and to keep this perspective that he is in control and that he is good. And we're talking about the numbers. Andrew's talking about the numbers on his head earlier being counted. Like, only God knows the number of hairs on his head. Like, he's the one that's so interested in these things, that big or small, whatever it may be, he's aware of it. And ultimately, this is not our home. Like, he has a better life to come. So don't put all your eggs in a basket in this world thinking like, oh man, it's never going to get better. Things are never going to change, because God, he is in control.
Yeah, I mean, our 24-hour news service is bent upon telling all of us that the sky is falling. That's how they keep us engaged. So I think for me, this kind of hit a few weeks ago. Here in Texas, the school situation is really out of control. And I had completely blocked everything in regards to news articles and such. But I had this friend, a very well-meaning friend. She was much into it. And so she would send me articles, she kept sending them. And I have to tell her, like, I've actually stopped reading the news on that particular topic. Otherwise, I don't sleep at night. So, but it just reminds me of the verse that says, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will take care of itself. Like today, right. The Lord has been so kind to us, and he continues to be kind to us. And we have all these outside sources telling us, ooh, but what about tomorrow? And then our little inside voice is like, oh, you're right. What about tomorrow? So it's just good to be careful as we consume. We, of course, need to be informed human beings, but you can do that without having continual updates of, news and whatever. So I think that is a big aspect here, but also it's for me as a solid Instagram consumer, I have to be careful even with the people that I follow on Instagram, my dear friends, to not use their lives as a comparison of mine. If my kids are having a horribly bad day and my friends' kids are having one of those like freakish good days where everyone's sitting at a table coloring and my kids are like, then I'm like, what did I do wrong? Like, they have amazing children, and my children are, just, I don't know, I should turn them in. And so I have to also be careful of that too, that we have to be careful of even not just like the broad sense of media, but also just our social media. We have to remember that people are putting out their highlight reel. Like that's real. And we all know it, but we need to remember it. And we need to think about, as you said, Andrew, how we're feeling when we stop the consumption. So when we put the phone down or we stop watching the show, do we feel uplifted or do we feel super ugh? So did you notice that? Ugh, that was my technical term for it. That's a technical term, everybody. Okay, so the last thing is maybe more of the effect of this digital age, and that is that we do find ourselves more and more disconnected from other real life human beings. So let's get into that real fast.
Yeah, this is a big one, and it's really it happens at the most basic level, like when you're in your home and you're with your family. So like, Keith, your thing with Steph, I mean, it's something that comes in between our relationships with those that we love the dearest, wives, children. It's also something that comes into play if we're out in public. I mean, we've all been that person, but we've certainly seen that person who's just completely clueless. Maybe they're going across a crosswalk, looking at their phone, and cars are having to slow down. We could be totally disengaged with the real world that's around us and the real people who are around us. And it's the thing of going into a coffee shop and looking around and everyone is on their phone or looking at a screen. No one's really engaging with one another. For us, we do a lot of one-to-one discipleship where we're meeting with others and studying the scriptures or just talking about life issues and encouraging one another. And that can be an issue where if the phone is out, and again, if the notifications are turned on, it can just be a distraction that keeps you from engaging fully with the person in front of you. Keith and I often quote Jim Downing, who was a modern day hero of the faith, lived to be over 100 years of age and was just dedicated to making disciples. And he would often say that if he was not able to give his full attention to someone, that was his signal that he needed to take a step back and rest or renew his own life so that he could, when he was meeting with someone, he wanted to give them his full attention. And for us, I think, phones can now be something that keeps us from giving people our full attention. So whether that's actually having the phone off the table and out of sight, having it face down so that you're not seeing the notifications come through, but whatever it needs to happen so that you can give the other person your full attention. Meal times, just having a no smartphone at the table policy. There's ways to do it, but like everything else that we've talked about today, it's going to take being intentional.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And this actually happened this week. A good friend of mine from the Navy, me and Zach were in the Navy with him. His name is David. And he was telling us like, hey, I've been following your stuff. I believe that you guys are believers, etc. And he had a really good question. So he sent me a private message and we started talking about it. But then at some point I realized like, this is not going to be fruitful. I'm like, this is going to be really hard to engage in serious conversation through social media. So I called him. I was like, hey, I'm just going to call, and he didn't answer the first time, but shout out to David. Like I said, he called right back and we spent the next 25 minutes engaging in conversation, but it was so much more fruitful than if we had kept going,
messaging
and messaging back and forth, and I think we both were grateful. Like, hey man, it's great to hear your voice, and I know we're not face to face, but this is still way more personal than it would have been if we were just, commenting or messaging each other. So I think remembering that we are ambassadors for Christ, and that God is reconciling the world like through people, his people. So that personal connection is so important. So even if it starts on social media, like you can take it away. Like you don't have to have your conversation there. You don't have to have it publicly in front of everybody. And if you get face-to-face time, with everything going on, like obviously be safe, but man, you can't replace that face-to-face time. So we have to keep our people skills sharp, in this age for sure.
Yeah, I agree, Keith. And that's such a great example. I think all of us have found us in those like back and forth, long monologue type DMs. And that's a great sign that if there's some way that we can connect with that person in a much more personal way, then that's going to benefit all of us. I think this whole quarantine business that happened earlier in the year was actually a really great thing in teaching me this importance of this particular thing, because I know everyone was like, oh, Zoom, it's the best, and like people are from high school are like, let's get together. And you're like, okay. So I learned from that, like being a social person, I can do Zoom. I can feel like we've connected, just by seeing each other on a screen. But a lot of people don't. And I had to really become aware of that and like see the needs when things started to deteriorate with friends and family that I knew that we needed to meet at a park and be 6 feet apart. Like I started having to implement those things almost in an emergency kind of way. I mean, it wasn't, but you're like, we need to see each other. We need to be physically in the same room. And so there's just importance to that. I don't know what it is. There's science involved. And you guys know I don't do science, but it's real. I know the results. I know the fruit of it. And the fruit is that there's really nothing that can replace, face-to-face interaction. And also in discipleship, that's where we also can start to see the people that are really committed. If people are willing to take the time to meet with you or to talk to you in a real setting and not just be like, hey, we'll just text, or like, hey, we'll just, we'll be in touch. Like that's a clear sign that there's not full like relationship there. Like you think it's almost false relationship, right? Like you can keep your friends kind of just apprised using it, but there's a deep relationship already there, but it cannot be what we base our relationships on. So get in person, people. Look people in the eye and not just via a Zoom camera.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so any last tips we want to give before we go?
Yeah, I think that might be a good way to end the show, Abigail, because we want to talk about 3 dangers of digital age, but also how to overcome them. We've shared a few of those, but if you guys have, you, Keith, and Abigail, if you've got maybe your top recommendation or maybe a top resource, and I'll mention 2 books that I would encourage people to check out if they have not already. The first is called Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. We'll put a link to it in the show notes and the video description. But Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, I read that late last year, early this year, and I'm really grateful because, with 2020 going the way it has, I've learned so much on a very practical level about how to navigate the digital age. So that's one. And another that I'm reading right now that I think is pretty amazing. It's called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And what's amazing about this book was that it was written in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
And he was really talking about the effect that television was having on people. And then you read it with a 2020 filter and you're like, holy smokes, it has only gone on steroids what this guy was talking about. So that's another one that we'll link, Amusing Ourselves to Death. It's been really good. So I would recommend that as well. How about you, Keith?
Yeah, just love the people around you. I think sometimes when I have a free moment, it's a nice moment to veg out and catch up on social media and et cetera. And I look around and the kids are like screaming for attention. So it's like, all right, let's go outside, or, same thing. Yeah, just love the people around you. Like, be present where you are, like, take advantage of the opportunities you have. And it's okay. Like if you have a moment to relax and get your, phone time in, like, okay, but we know we're not struggling for that time. So like, we're actually struggling to love people. So yeah, love the people around you, call the person you haven't talked to in a long time, like check in on family, and do what God wants us to do.
Yeah. And I think just be intentional. So be intentional with your time. And that includes the time that we spend with digital content. So if that's your Netflix time or your social media time, just know ahead of time what you want to give to that and really be intentional to stick with it. And I think just from this conversation today, I'm going to implement myself having someone ask me the question, are you following through with that? Because I don't have somebody like that in my life at this point. And I know that there's awesome people in my life who would be happy to ask me. And it will definitely help me as an Enneagram 3 to have to respond with the real number. So, so I did not share my time on my phone, Keith. So thanks for sharing yours. You guys will just have to guess what mine was, but it went down 10% last week. So yay for me.
Nice.
But thank you guys for watching/listening. If you have ways that you are helping keep your own digital content in line and we didn't talk about it, we would love to hear it. I for sure would. So please send us a comment or an email at info@intotheharvest.org. We're all about your emails and we love hearing from you. We love the conversations we have with you guys. So we'll see you again next week. Bye, guys. Thank you.